Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today's Friday. It's Council on Future Conflict, episode 452. Syria's falling, and it's Trump's time. Guys, I just want to let the chat know. Yes, it was echoing for me as well. I don't know what's going on with that. Did you hear that, Watcher, when the theme was playing there?
You said the very beginning. I heard it.
Yeah, it didn't echo for me. I'm not sure.
Well, then it's probably, if you didn't hear it, then it's probably your fault. It's that's what happens when you get a laptop that's even faster than you are. It's like it's doing all kinds of stuff. All right. Let us go around the horn. Joe, how you doing today, brother?
You know what? I am splendid. I am going to be going after we're done here. I'm going to run out and get all set up for the Kalispell Gun Show, where we'll be signing books and selling T-shirts and all that good stuff. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Are you guys setting up a Canadian gun donation table where people can donate?
No, but I'm gonna put a sign up that says that we are a official gun turn-in station for the Canadian government. A lot of Albertans come down to these things, so maybe one of them will just drop off their rifle to me, and I'll take care of it for them. But in today's weird weapons segment, we have the SPACs. The special.
What kind of wrench is that?
It's this is actually a U.S. government issue. It's the Spec Plus SPACs. It's actually a firefighter's tool converted into a little bit more. That's actually a hydrant wrench, and we can do other things with it. Cool tools. Ontario Knife Company. You can find them. So
very good. Watcher, how you doing today, brother?
Doing excellent. Ready for another exciting show, and whoever said venison for breakfast, yeah, man, I'm on board with that.
That's me. And that deer was taken less than a half mile from where I'm sitting, less than 7 days ago.
Nice.
So amazing.
We've had a lot of hunters out here on the ranch that have been sniping deer and then donating portions of what they grab to the ranch, and that's been eating good the last few days.
It's pretty awesome. We always eat good at the ranch. They do some pretty amazing things in the kitchen there.
Yeah.
Wow. Facts. When it's not just beef and rice, it's amazing.
But yet there's nothing wrong with the beef and rice.
I remember somebody telling me this had been a while ago, but they had this venison sausage or something that they made. They added I think beef fat to it.
Beef or pork, whichever.
Yeah, and they said it was just really good.
Yeah, I can't believe we're just learning about that. That's not a new thing.
Well, no, man. It's like I said, I had heard about that a long time ago. I hadn't really thought about it. When you said venison for breakfast, that made me think of venison sausage.
Yeah, I know. The Duchess of Montana asked me the other day if I know how to make it, and I told her yes. So that's probably going to happen.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I think beef fat is coming back into vogue. When Kennedy said he wanted French fries, cooked in beef tallow at McDonald's.
I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't say thank you so much, Stormy, and have a good morning. We appreciate what you do here.
Yeah. She's been she's got that new job, so she's not able to spend as much time in the mornings with us. So we appreciate anything we can get. All right. Let's jump right into it, guys. Why wait? What's been interesting, guys, is we're going to do a full segment towards the end of the show on Trump stuff, but this is kind of maybe, I don't know, this is a Mexico segment, but this is definitely Trump policies are already having an effect. Mexico president will ask Trump to deport non-Mexican migrants directly to their home countries. Now, I could understand this on one hand, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, you let them come through your country. Why can't you then, take on the onus of letting them go back out of your country, right? So there's that side, but then there's the other side that says, yeah, I mean, if somebody gets here, we don't know exactly how they get there. So ultimately, if it's, it might be easier just to send Venezuelans back to Venezuela or.
Well, yes, but it's almost as if a lot of them purposefully ditch their IDs, so we have no idea who they are or where they came from.
Well, I think it's probably not super hard just from accents alone to figure out where people are from.
Tattoos.
And tattoos, and there's all kinds of ways to figure that kind of stuff out.
And by the way, the flags they're waving as they cross our border.
Right. Let's see. Mexico's president said Thursday she will ask President-elect Donald Trump to deport non-Mexican migrants directly to their home countries rather than dumping them at the Mexican border. President, I always love this name, Claudia Sheinbaum. It's like
real Mexican name.
Super Mexican sound. I mean, she looks Mexican, but the name is just kind of throws you off. She said she hopes to reach an agreement with Trump so that they send people who come from other countries to their countries of origin. Mexico, like any other country, is not obligated to accept non-Mexican migrants, but it has agreed to do so in recent past, especially from countries like Cuba, Venezuela, which often refuse deportation flights. Yeah, and that would make sense, right? If Venezuela won't accept its people back, then literally they're coming across the Mexican border. Mexico, they're your problem now. At least you guys.
Now listen, I have a problem with her comment because she was okay with accepting them across her southern border. She just doesn't want to take them back across her northern border. So
yeah,
you will take what we give you.
You'll get what you get, and you won't get upset. Let's see. Mexican officials have said they are already making preparations if Trump follows through his pledge to carry out large-scale deportations of migrants who lack proper documents once he takes office on January 20th. Mexico is obviously fearful of two things: large-scale deport. Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mexicans, my favorite Iron Man from south of the border down Mexico way has sent us a super chat for $9.99. He says the South Carolina Hilton Head tortilla plantation stands at the ready to sort out the Spanish accents to deport these illegal alien invader dirtbags. Amen, brother. I am glad to see you're here. I did see your what is it? Your application to Doge on X. I thought that was very appropriate. It'd be nice to see some folks from that we know get into that. And I think you were offering to help audit the IRS. I thought that was, that is a meaningful endeavor indeed. Lance Corporal Veteran for $2 says this is her trying to appear strong and save face. Yeah, absolutely. Because ultimately, Trump is just going to, if he may acquiesce just to kind of make points in negotiation, but ultimately, if she doesn't play ball, he'll just do what he wants, and she won't, and she'll like it. Mexico is obviously fearful of two things: large-scale deportation of Mexican citizens and large number of non-Mexicans being deported at the border crossings that are ill-equipped to deal with them. Experts estimate that there are 4 million Mexicans living in the U.S. without proper documentation. Mexico is already preparing its consular services in the U.S. With additional manpower to help deportation cases involving its own citizens. One of the things that I'm liking, the more I hear about it, it's not like anybody's saying, oh, well, we're not going to deport people. They're like, okay, well, he's going to deport all these people. How do we work through that problem set, right? It's like it's already a given that he's going to do this, which I love the Schadenfreude on their part, having to deal with something they said would never happen 6 months ago. But I want to see these people getting on buses or airplanes or whatever before I really believe that it's happening. Joe, what's your take?
Yeah, it's an undertaking that's going to be a little bit harder to do than to talk about, right? It's easy to say I'm going to do all this, but first of all, we don't even know where these people are. and finding them is going to be kind of hard. And you cannot, despite what people think, you cannot just go out and start rounding up the Hispanic-looking folks or the African-looking folks. That's not how that's going to go. So it's going to be a weird thing. We'll see how it goes. I guess I'm a wait and see kind of guy.
Joe, I think if they start with the low-hanging fruit, the people who they process through the criminal detention, just nationwide, right? I mean, how happy would New York City be to be able to get rid of all of the illegals out of their jails? That would be I guess you could say low-hanging fruit, right?
And then them run any illegals in their jail. These people are virtuous saints who are better Americans than you.
Well, that you may be right when you're talking to some of like the migrant rights activists, but Eric Adams seemed to be changing his tunes, especially considering that there may be a Trump pardon somewhere in his future that he's probably counting on. So it's interesting when you have leverage on people, they start changing their tune. It says here, but third country deported migrants pose a thornier challenge. It could include considerable numbers of Haitians, Cubans, and Venezuelans. Between 2022 and 23, Mexico agreed to accept up to 30,000 migrants per month from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, countries that are difficult for the U.S. to deport to for diplomatic or political reasons. It would be a really sick. I wouldn't say sick, but just a really bleak joke is if you put the Haitian immigrants on C-17s and then you didn't tell them where they're going, and then you flew them right into Port-au-Prince, and said, "Okay, barbecues this way. The Kenyans are this way, and the jungle's this way, right?" And just kind of kick them out the back of the C-17. That'd be kind of
I think that's exactly what we should do. I don't even think that's a joke. I think that's.
I know. I'm just saying. It becomes a military operation because the Haitian airport is not secure. That would probably be an okay use for the military. Let's see. Such returns pose a monetary burden on Mexico. Cry me a fucking river. It's a monetary burden. Mexico had offered some of the repatriated Venezuelans a stipend of $110 per month for 6 months to help them reestablish themselves in their home countries. Well, I mean, okay, so $110 a month in Mexico ain't bad. What's that, Watcher?
What I mean, no, you're struggling and you think this will cause issue. Okay, well, don't fucking do that. How difficult is that?
Yeah. I mean, how hard would it be to build a wall across the southern border of Mexico? I mean, hell, I bet Trump, after he builds our wall, I bet Trump might even offer to build them a wall there too. Just
the easiest thing to do would be for all of the countries in North America to split the cost of building a wall across the Isthmus of Panama. Yeah. It's the narrowest point. Solves the problem for everyone.
Yeah, shut down the Darien Gap forever. All right, let's see. However, the task of finding jobs, shelter, and transportation for deported Mexicans would present an even greater challenge for Mexico. Migration has long been a sensitive issue between the two. What's going to be a sensitive issue for Mexico is if we turn off or start directly tariffing the remittances from the United States to Mexico.
That is exactly what I was just going to say, is what Mexico is truly, truly terrified of in this scenario is that they're about to lose the income of 4 million people by their own estimate that are working here illegally and sending the majority of their funds back to Mexico.
Oh, Watcher, yes. I'd go further than that. I would actually tariff the money from legal Americans. Anybody sending money from America through Western Union to Mexico, 10% tariff.
That's a great idea because that $1,000 that they're sending home every week goes a lot further in Mexico than it does here.
Yeah. Yeah, it is literally robbing Peter to pay Paul in the larger economic. Let's see. In November, Trump claimed
you'll create a koala network on the southern border too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. That informal money changing kind of hand-to-hand network.
Yep.
In November, Trump claimed that Sheinbaum had agreed to stop migration through Mexico following a phone call between the two leaders. Sheinbaum, meanwhile, suggested Mexico was already doing its part and had no interest in closing its borders. Nobody's asking her to close Mexico's borders. All we're asking is for it to respect our ports of entry, right? If you got somebody coming across the border who, let's say they're going to be seek asylum, right? They just have to come to a port of entry, right? So don't let them, use your people to keep people from crossing the border.
That right there is why I hate so much of the double talk by the left on this, right? Like, oh, these people are just seeking asylum. You don't seek asylum by sneaking in. You seek asylum by presenting yourself at a port of entry.
At a legal port of entry. And one of the things that Biden did was that he basically said anybody who gets across could just seek asylum.
Let's be very clear about another portion of this, which is you don't get to seek asylum because gangs in your local country. You don't get to seek asylum because of economic hardship, which is what the vast majority of the people claiming asylum are claiming for. The only thing you get to claim asylum for is government persecution.
And 90% of the people who seek asylum are Cubans who actually, I'm sorry, 90% that actually have legitimate claims for asylum are Cubans. Probably the other 10 are Venezuelans, because Venezuela and Cuba are the two kind of countries that have legitimate political persecution going on at this point. But even then, I wouldn't trust most Venezuelans that come across the border as far as I could throw them, because 9 times out of 10 they're coming out right out of prison. All right, guys. Anything else on the border or immigration you want to talk about since we're on the topic before we move on?
They have to go back. There we go.
Well, like I said at the beginning of the segment, I'll believe it when I see it, but I love everything I'm hearing, So,
and I honestly think too that we need to stick to the law as it's written. If you are booted out for having entered the country illegally, you are then barred from re-entry by any method for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important, Joe. I mean, no more of this, I'm going to come across as a tourist next year. Nope.
Which I'd like honestly, it's funny because they have been doing that even under the Biden administration, but strangely, it seems to only get applied to people who have a certain skin color.
Yeah, like Johnsy, right?
Yup.
Yeah. Try being a South African and trying to get in here on a tourist visa versus anyone from South America.
How long do they have an automatic visa from South Africa, or is it a you have to go through?
No, you have to go through an unbelievable labyrinth.
K9 Reaper here, right? Because it's really hard to get a visa from South Africa.
Well, it's hard to get a visa from South Africa if you're Afrikaans. If you are black, well, welcome. Come on in.
All right. Anything else, gents, before we move on? Because this next one is a little on the spicy side.
You know what, though? There's a good comment made down in the chat. You don't get to seek asylum in any country. You have to do it in the closest safe country. That's true. The one country rule, right?
Okay, so I think we're conflating asylum and refugee status. So
well, that's true. Refugees have to be the one country rule, right? The first
one country rule, right? As soon as you cross through a border, you have to become you are a refugee. As soon as you cross another border, you become an economic immigrant. And so that's pretty standard. That's even the UN agrees with that. But of course, everybody wants to call these people all refugees. The sticky ones.
Only America is the country held to these standards.
Yeah.
So,
well, ironically enough, Haiti and Cuba and Mexico are really like the only countries Canada, and we may see more Canadian refugees coming across the border in the
you may
future.
actually see some open conflict between Alberta and the federal government.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's not one of our topics today, but I don't think it is, at least. Yeah, it's not, but I think that's pretty interesting that they're going that hard in the paint. Of course, what Joe's referring to is, what is it? 239 specific gun models have been designated as essentially illegal to both own and
additional. That brings the total number to 3,200. Yeah.
Any word on what they're talking about?
Well, the reason is because Alberta is about to issue a Declaration of Rights for Albertans that includes the right to bear arms. They're trying to get ahead of that, and trying to get them confiscated or made illegal before Alberta can make that happen. So there's a lot more going on in there. Stan can speak to it better than me, but there is a lot of things going on between Alberta, the federal government, and even Manitoba. So,
all right, I'm gonna share this because since we've already broached the topic and we're actually ahead of schedule, so might as well talk about this. So this is a tweet from Viva Fry. Canadian government is now confiscating firearms from law-abiding citizens and looking to donate them to Ukraine in its fight for democracy, despite Ukraine having suspended elections indefinitely. So, there's your liberal democracy. Let's see what this guy has to say here.
The government is adding a further 324 unique makes and models of assault-style firearms to the list of prohibited firearms in Canada. This prohibition takes effect immediately. This means these firearms can no longer be legally used, sold, or imported in Canada, and can only be transferred or transported under extremely limited circumstances. As part of that process, the government of Canada has committed to the Ukraine to identify whether some of these guns could be donated to support the fight for democracy in Ukraine.
Wait a second.
Part of that process.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
The government of Canada has committed to the Ukrainian government to identify whether some of these guns could be donated to support the fight for democracy in Ukraine.
I mean, that's rich, guys. What say you?
I will say that, dear Canadians, if you do not yet recognize a pattern, I can no longer help you.
You know, you should compare this to with the statements made by that doctor who said a whole bunch of pandemics are going to hit on January 21st. Anyway.
Well, you know, I mean, Joe, you had mentioned Alberta specifically. You know, it was just the other day that Donald Trump was telling Trudeau that, listen, I'll make you guys the 51st state. Alberta would be absolutely right there for, you know, a candidate for statehood if you had, you know, you couldn't have asked for a better group of people to incorporate into the union.
Yeah, they're more American than a lot of Americans. Alberta is just Montana north. So, pretty solid stuff.
Well, it's just one of those kind of things where, you know, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And, you know, my tweet about this was, you know, if you let them do this to you, you get what you deserve. Now, I know that's a little heartless, but ultimately, you know, Canadians that just sit there and complain about it but continue to comply, I mean, what's that all about?
Well,
yeah. Forging Freedom is a great comment. Let me get this straight. Guns are necessary for fighting for democracy in Ukraine, but not in Canada.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lesson there. If you want to retain any semblance of democracy in Canada, don't give them your guns. Oh, but wait, you're subjects of the crown anyway, so.
yeah, there is that.
Well, they do have more gun rights than people in the UK do, that's for sure. PSA's helicopter tours for $2 says Massachusetts governor and legislature did the same 2A ban on 8-1. Though I believe didn't that get held up in court?
I believe there's a stay on that because there's this piece of paper that says that no state shall pass a law abridging the rights and privileges of the United States citizen.
Yeah, shall not be infringed, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then you got the whole supremacy clause, federal government takes precedence over. Anyway. I mean, what do we know, Joe? All right. Guys, let's move on to our next story here. This one is spicy, guys. And, I've seen a lot of controversy on this. So essentially what you had was a CEO of UnitedHealthcare, I think Brian Thompson is his name, and he came to Manhattan, and he got capped in the back of the head with a guy on a street, an assassin on the street using a suppressed pistol.
He didn't get capped in the head at all.
Was it probably in his back?
So this is how you know it wasn't a professional assassin. The first round took him in the right calf. And the second round hit him in the lower back. Traditional Glock shoots low and right, but we actually did a really, really good. I know Rick was over there watching last night. We did a really good analysis of this last night. First round hit him in the calf. So what a professional assassin. Second one took him in the back. Third round missed entirely. So,
oh wow!
At 15 feet.
Did he do a kill shot from just close up? I mean,
no, he tried and missed.
Shot? So what shot killed him?
The one in the back.
Oh, okay. So like hit him in the kidneys or something like that.
Kidney, spleen, whatever.
Yeah. A lot of blood there. Let's see. So this guy decides to, take this guy out, and he shoots the pistol, and there's a failure to eject on pretty much every round. And so, and then he leaves behind a bunch of evidence. Well, I was going to say he leaves behind a bunch of evidence. And then everybody, of course, starts jumping on, all the smart guys. Oh, it was because of subsonic rounds, or it was because it was one of those BNT, bolt action suppressed pistols, which is a $5,000 pistol. So no, that's not what the guy was.
No, so we talked about this at length last night, and I think that it was an amateur, but I think it was an amateur activist. And I think some of the evidence left behind was meant to mislead, right? I can get a phone. I can go buy a burner phone and create a false pattern of life on that phone. Take it to a couple Donald Trump rallies, take it to a couple places, folks that are not like me frequent, and leave the phone there for a while, and then drop this phone on the ground at the scene of a crime. It sends the investigation in an entirely different direction. And there's been a lot of talk about the words that were written on the shell casings, matching a book about the insurance industry, except the word depose is not in that book. And the word depose would tend to point me towards the left. And it's entirely the left who is cheering on this behavior.
Yeah. If you go over to Blue Sky, evidently they're all happy about it over there on Blue Sky. And unfortunately, there have been people in the conservative movement that have been happy about it too. But ultimately, the rule of law is a good thing, and we shouldn't endorse anybody going around assassinating anybody, whether you like them or not, in the middle of the streets.
Well, this is why I sell the "You Are Already in the Collapse" T-shirts, which are available on my website, and will be available at the Kalispell Gun Show this weekend. So, you're already in the collapse.
So I wanted to. This is because I knew you had talked about that, Joe. I think I'd saw some reference to it on X that you were saying. And the interesting thing about this story is, essentially this guy, they've got pictures of him now. He took his mask down to flirt with a girl at this hostel that he stayed at. And evidently he arrived from New York City on the 24th, stepping off a Greyhound bus at the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan around 9 p.m. And that bus route originates in Atlanta, so that's where he came from. Let's see, they don't know where he boarded the coach, so it could have come from somewhere else. While others indicate the investigators believe he was aboard from the start of the nearly 900-mile journey, which can take 20 hours or more on Greyhound. He said he then stayed at the High New York City hostel. The revelation of his face appears to have come from a flirtatious moment of weakness when he interacted with a woman working at the hostel's front desk, lowering his mask to beam at her across the desk. So the irony there is, Joe, if this was one of your kind of your incels, your autistic incel, right wing MAGA people, there's no way in hell he would have done that. He would have just kept his mask on and been focused in.
Who stays in hostels?
Oh yeah. That's another. That was another one that I thought was
a pretty solid indicator right there. And I know there's a lot of you who just want to make this into some sort of a John Wick thing. You don't almost not kill a guy to make it look sloppy, right?
Right.
And you don't do the entire crime right in front of a camera and have such a trail that was so easy to find. But I will point one thing out, though. 12 hours prior to the assassination, a bomb threat was called in at Brian Thompson's home in Minnesota. I think that was probably an attempt to see who was in the house and if Thompson was indeed gone and in New York City where he was supposed to be. And there, another piece of this is that the firearm was bought in Connecticut. If this guy was on a bus coming from Atlanta, he was not in Connecticut buying the gun. So there's more to this network. He's probably moving through a safe house network at this point. This all points towards RevCom /Antifa involvement.
Yeah. Far last neo-Marxist activist is the most likely point. They want to try to make it look personal, like it's somebody who is directly injured by this insurance company. But ultimately, I think this is going after the 1% type situation. So this is where we get into bizarre territory, Joe, because like you've seen the footage, I've seen the footage. Watcher, I'm sure you've seen the footage. I don't know that I want to play it here on YouTube, but it says here, police have taken a keen interest in a gun sale in Connecticut involving a highly uncommon weapon that appears similar to the one seen in the video of the killing. It's a covert type weapon, not sold widely, said CBS News, the authoritative sources for firearms information. Hey, there's Mr. Blaine Pardo. Speaking of authoritative sources for firearms.
Speaking of assassinations, here's Blaine Pardo.
Blaine, how are you doing, brother?
I don't know. I'm trying this out. How do I sound?
You sound great.
Okay. I've lost all my hearing, so. Well, most of it
good.
Anyway. I got this cranked up all the way. I'm going to give this a shot.
Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you okay. You're a little tinny, obviously, but
yeah.
What I can't tell is how loud I'm talking.
You're fine.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Cool.
Yeah, we were just talking about the assassination in New York City, right there in the street. We were just saying it has all the hallmarks of some sort of RevCom, Antifa style person.
It is. It's totally Antifa. I was right there. Right off the bat. I was like, the guy was smirking. So if this was a revenge thing, you wouldn't have a guy out there smirking before he did it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it. There was a lot of commentary about it being a revenge thing. Revenge killings are done face to face.
Yeah.
And almost always with a knife. So.
Oh, it's personal. It's personal. This doesn't smack of this. This smacks of some crazy alt left nut job.
I will say, while I didn't see anything that looked very professional, I did notice two things, right? And one was a lack of any hesitation to fire, and then anticipation that he was going to have those failure to eject. So he had tested his weapon, he knew it wouldn't, and so he knew that he was going to have to manually rack the slide each time in order to. So I mean, there is that. I don't think that's any kind of level of professionalism. It just means he probably shot his gun before and he knew what to expect.
Yeah,
I don't point out that a proper silencer or suppressor, let me say that right, a proper suppressor with the proper ammo won't cycle. You'll have to manually cycle it every time.
Correct. So that's what I was going to say when we started.
Well, I've got the next. So anyway, they're trying to say that he used this kind of bolt. It's a bolt action B&T.
He did not. It's clearly a Glock in the video.
Right. This is what they're saying here, which is absolutely stupid. And it's so, Watcher, if you can you go to the next link? I don't want to watch the video because I don't want to do that here on YouTube. So the next the X link, right there, that one. This one kind of breaks down why, in fact, this is not one of those well-rod pistols. All right, so this is a guy I follow on X called Louisville La Gun. He says a bunch of misinformation about today's murder on the healthcare CEO. I'm going to debunk some of the firearms nonsense. Myth one, that it's a well-rod pistol, categorically false, which I believe is correct. He says, so he shows the full length. Just don't play the video. He said, here's the full length video of the shooting. If you want to see this video, you can find it easily all over the internet. He says you can see the shooter having to manually clear casings that failed to eject, and you can see smoke coming from the breech of the pistol when it's fired. This goes against the claim that it's a well rod type pistol, which is correct. So the well rod is a bolt action. It's like a twist and pull, right, Joe?
Yeah, just like the Ruger Mark whatever thing, yeah.
Right. And so that's not what we have here with this pistol that this guy uses. It says here the well rod pistol uses a bolt action mechanism that requires a twist and pull open to open and close the breech. In this photo, you can see how the pistol must be twisted. So this is from the Twitter thread there, Watcher. And then so he's got a slow-mo of the guy firing, so you can kind of see how the pistol is behaving. So you see the slide go back. And there's, if you're wondering why the slide is not going all the way back and it's failing to eject, well, there's actually a good reason for that. Let's see. Let's get past the subsonic ammo thing because I think that's not important. So the failure to eject malfunction is likely caused because the silencer didn't have a Nielsen device. So a Nielsen device is basically a piece that actually adds additional blowback so that there will be a sufficient recoil. Because, like, for instance, a pistol is recoil operated, right? It uses the recoil of the round fired in order to cycle the slide back. Well, when you have a suppressor, you don't get enough of that. you don't get that action correctly. So you have to have this device on there. And oddly enough, this device has to be taken off if you put the same suppressor on like a pistol caliber carbine or something along those lines, because those work through different methods, and you don't need the Nielsen device. It says the additional mass of a silencer on a Browning style barrel prevents the firearm from cycling properly. The booster gives a bit more oomph to the recoil, and the presence of live ammunition at the crime scene is an indicator that the firearm was malfunctioning instead of working as intended. The other thing too is, Joe, I think maybe the spent casings were left behind, but I think the unshot casings were probably the ones dropped with the words on it, intentionally as part of the decoy. Blaine, what's your take on those cases with the reference to that book?
If this was somebody killing somebody because, let's say, their wife or mother was denied benefits, they wouldn't have done that. As a matter of fact, they would have stood there and let themselves be caught, or they would have shot themselves there. They wouldn't try to conceal their identity. The fact that this person went out of their way to conceal their identity, to me anyway, just points to somebody who wanted to kill a CEO and thought that, hey, if I kill an insurance CEO, nobody's really going to care. Now, I'm going to give you that there is a certain amount of belief of that. Having dealt with insurance companies, we all have had pains in the ass with that. But I think this is somebody who literally is thrill killing more than, or politically motivated killing, rather than someone who has been bereaved. They wouldn't have hidden. If it was my mother who had died and it was because the insurance company didn't do it, I wouldn't hide who I was. I'd stand there and let the cops arrest me, because they're going to get me anyway.
Yeah.
This guy's trying to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly a misdirection. Watcher, what's your take? You haven't really had a lot to say on this.
No, so I agree with everything Blaine said, except I do think the choice of an insurance CEO is intentional. I think they want all CEOs to be thinking it could be them, but I think that they went after him specifically because he's the head of the largest healthcare insurance company in America. If this were a revenge thing, not only that, I don't think. Am I weird for saying that, like, if somebody gets wronged by, like, let's say that it's like somebody who was working on a Disney movie and got wronged, or felt that they got wronged by Disney. I don't think they're going after the CEO. I think they're going after whatever the hiring manager or whatever it was that wronged them, right?
Yeah, the person who gave them the negative interaction.
Correct. So I think that just screams that it's the far left all over again. Look, they've gone into, we're the rebel alliance fighting against the evil Hitler, Nazi, Stalinists, Mussolinites. I don't know. But they need to ratchet up, in my opinion. And I've been saying this for a while. Like, they're quiet for a reason, and it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I think
it'd be interesting to see the position of UnitedHealthcare on gender transition surgery. And perhaps that played a role in this.
Start looking for cross references on other kind of hot button issues, maybe even reproductive care or whatever, these types of things. Hunch the Dirty Roofer for $5 says, I'm reminded of the hotel scene from Boondock Saints, then Defoe's breakdown after. This was amateurs thinking they were being tactical black ops. Yeah, I mean, that's what I think he thought he would look cool. And, Joe, the other thing, too, is I feel like he did it. He knew exactly where that camera was, and he wanted, basically he wanted this video to get out, is what I think.
Oh yeah.
I do.
You don't do it because he did it right in from that doorman of the hotel.
Yeah, this was a message being sent. The times are changing. We said this last night on Sons of Liberty. It's probably an opening of a campaign. So we will see. If you know the insurgency triangle, targeted assassinations is just below the open conflict phase.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they didn't get the rioting they wanted during the election. So they've got to do something with this anger and aggression. So they're changing their approach. This is a Timu level assassin.
Correct. You know what's the other thing though? The reason that the left is out in mass ops trying to make this guy look like Hitman is because I think the other purpose of this is as a recruiting tool when they're kind of at a low in recruiting.
Okay, so I agree with all of that, though I will throw one kind of contrary point out there. Antifa does a really good job of taking credit for things. So I'm surprised we haven't seen, if this was an organized neo-Marxist RevCom kind of.
Wait, you're saying that the
action.
Organization that's famous for saying that Antifa is just an idea is good.
No. That's Nadler. That's Congressman Nadler, who's famous for saying it's just an idea.
But the problem is there's no national Antifa organization, so who would take credit?
Well, I'm just saying, like the whoever this guy is associated with, like either his group or he would do it directly. I mean, that tends to be the thing with
Scott,
these
when
kind
they
of
bumped off what was apparently a random guy in the street in Seattle or Portland, sorry, they didn't want to take credit for it. I don't know why.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm gonna just refer back to the RevCom folks in the '60s because that was the style back then. Now maybe it's a different era and there's different thinking. I'm just saying that your communists in the past have generally put it. They want to send a message and they want everybody to know exactly who's sending the message.
Don't
60 years ago was a different era.
Yes. Yeah, don't fall into the classic mistake of fighting the last war, Scott.
Well, and not only that,
I'm not fighting the last word. I'm just saying. Go ahead, Blaine. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it's okay. I'm the one that's got the hearing thing going nuts. I think a lot of this is you don't claim credit because the minute you do, everyone in your group becomes a suspect and it narrows it down. So it's best to not say a thing at this point because the guy is still on the loose.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing too, is like nobody wants to be a martyr, but at the same time,
Joe posted yesterday, I think the most telling thing, how long will it be before they blame this on Trump?
That's why I think the phone being left behind and the indicators that it was some sort of a anti-insurance company, anti-vaccine thing was all left behind. I think those were all planted things to try and throw the track off and enable them to say, "Oh no, this is a Trump supporter." I think that's true.
Yeah, that's interesting. We haven't seen anything come out about from the guy based on the phone or anything like that. So it'll be interesting. Is there a manifesto or something like that on the phone that they're able to try to point some fingers at?
If there was, I would already be suspicious of it because who does something like that on their phone? Right?
Well, I just meant like saving the file. Yeah. I was just thinking saving the file, like I've got the full script to all of my comics actually on my phone. I don't write on my phone though.
The problem with our cell phone security is our behaviors and disciplines, Scott.
I totally agree with you. So, guys, what do you think this is going to break open anytime soon, or is this going to be something that we're going to be like? Is it just going to disappear into the ether and we're never going to hear about it again?
I think if he remains free for another 24 hours, the story will be gone. So,
yeah, if you don't have some kind of like breakthrough on either his identity or some sort of key piece of evidence that was left behind, I tend to agree with you, Joe. I think, and especially if it goes against the narrative, right?
yeah, I
Like we've
still
seen in
think
the
that
past.
that's coming, right? You're going to hear this narrative painting. That's coming probably today. So,
Yeah.
Well, remember, we never caught the guy who sent, what was it, ricin to all those places after 9/11.
that's true.
Right. Yeah.
And that was much larger story, much bigger scope, more people affected. It changed our entire postal system, and they never caught him.
And on the flip side of that, the guy that they claim sent all those bombs around, who magically appeared in front of several CNN news crews at several different Trump rallies, is probably not the guy who actually sent those bombs through the mail, because I can't imagine he lived in such a liberal area, drove around in a Trump sticker emblazoned van, and no one ever saw him, right? So the narrative shifting things happen.
The only thing I would say to you, Forging Freedom TV, about this, you're saying it's way beyond Antifa. These are your 30-year-old true believer radicals. The 20-year-olds from back when who were fighting, what is it, base stick man and all that kind of stuff in Seattle and Berkeley and all that kind of stuff. That was just like 8 years ago, like right before Trump was elected. Obama was still in office. So, I mean, those people would all be around 30 now, wouldn't they?
Correct.
I'm thinking that Forging Freedom is onto something, and these people are actually probably older than that. This is one of those in-between ones. The true leaders of Antifa came out in 1988 at the World Trade Organization rally or World Trade Organization riot in Seattle.
Right, in Seattle.
Those
right.
people are now the senior cadre. These guys are that next bunch, and then you have the street punks that are out there now. This person falls in that middle. I think Forging Freedom is onto something there. So,
all right. Anything else on this, guys, or we'll go ahead and move on. Now the next one is more of less of a news thing and more of a what do you think about this, right? So. Lavrov Tucker interview, U.S. needs to cooperate for the sake of the universe. Now, we have not generally been pro-Russia here on this channel, but at the same time, we can say, hey, at least we understand where they're coming from, and we recognize the fact that the Russians have a point of view, and they may even have one or two valid points, right? And so this is how we kind of approach the whole Ukraine thing. Though I don't know that we need to cooperate per se with Russia. So I wanted to get your guys' takes on this. First of all, let me ask you: have any of you guys seen any of the excerpts or any of this video yet?
No, but I will maintain that Sergei Lavrov is the best statesman that we have in the world today.
Yeah, as far
probably
as
the most
being
experienced.
A professional. Yeah.
Yep.
Anybody else want to take a crack at this? I thought maybe we could listen to a little segment or something along this line before and then kind of. Oh, you're muted, Blaine.
My life, story of my life, guys. The the thing that's really interesting is, I would say, the whole policy of us yelling at Russia and yelling words like "don't" hasn't worked. It hasn't worked at all. The last 4 years of policy towards Russia has not made them stop, has not made them less aggressive. Everything that has been done in the last few years is wrong. Okay, let's be very clear about that. And once you accept that, then the concept of we need to work with Russia actually kind of makes some sense. And I hate Russia, but screaming at them hasn't done anything. Sanctioning them, nothing. Hasn't slowed them in the least. Calling them terrible names doesn't do anything. You're only going to deal with the bear by talking to the bear.
Right.
Nixon understood that. Reagan definitely understood that. And so, yeah, the time has come. Let's have some dialogue with them and at least try to see if we can find anything that's common ground that's peaceful.
Do you know why we hate Russia so much right now? Because they're acting like we act. They're doing the exact same things that we do. You want your neighbor's behavior to change, you invade them. We did that with Iraq, Afghanistan, all these other places. We're mad because we think we're the only people who can apply force in the international arena. We have a monopoly on that. We're the world's cop, and not Russia. And I don't necessarily hate Russia, and I honestly believe that Putin is doing what he thinks best for his people and for his nation, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, invading Ukraine might not have been the best thing in the world, but we have a certain amount of culpability to accept in that.
Well, I heard an interesting kind of take on like why all this started, right? So we won the Cold War, right? And then we won the kind of the period directly after that. But once Putin came and became, his economy was in shambles in 99 when he took power. And so he immediately did the one thing, he had essentially two arrows in his quiver. He had military production because everybody in the world still used, ammunition and, supplies and things like that that are based on Russian military equipment. Right. And then the other thing he had was, gas and oil. And then, oh, by the way, Russia has $75 trillion worth of mineral resources in its borders, the most of any other country in the world. So they have things that they can do now. Some of that stuff's not going to be, prove valuable for a while. And so, Joe, what he ended up doing was he started selling the gas and the gas coming through pipelines into Europe and into all these places where we had, won our victory in the end of the Cold War is a lot cheaper. And he started, basically threatening to turn off the gas, and he got a lot of concessions out of these countries. He was able to start influencing through basically petroleum or energy diplomacy, right? And so we didn't like that. And so we started, kind of pushing back against that. And that's the reason why I think, NATO more broadly, but specifically the US wanted to move in and control Burisma, the energy extraction company within Ukraine, because that would have given us an alternative to Russian gas, production in Europe. So
who was their American lawyer again?
It was Biden's son, who just got a pardon, shockingly enough. Anyway, so this is how I tend to agree with that analysis as far as using the energy policies to undermine what we were doing. So I wanted to play. We talked about you have to talk to the bear, right? Blaine, you had just said that. And so I want to play at 28-21, what would it take to end the war? Could you play that? Watch it. Yeah, you're right there.
He is not adequate.
So what are the terms under which Russia would cease hostilities? What are you asking for?
10 years ago, in February 2014, we were asking only for the deal between the president and the opposition,
yes,
to have government of national unity.
Yeah, Hunch Dirty Roofer for $10 says, Scott, we may have won the first round of the Cold War at the cost of the second. The Department of Education was fully subverted by the 70s. By the way, the Department of Education was formed in Jimmy Carter's term. So it was created in the 70s by, somebody who's very, influenced by the communists. The USSR didn't just hold out long enough for them to reach power. Yeah, I agree with your general train of thought there.
to hold early elections to be implemented. The deal was signed, and we were asking for the implementation of this deal. They were absolutely impatient and aggressive, and they were, of course, pushed, I have no slightest doubt, by the Americans, because if Victoria Nuland and the US ambassador agreed the composition of the government, why wait for 5 months to hold early elections? The next time we were in favor of something was when the Minsk agreements were signed.
Yes.
I was there. The negotiations lasted for 17 hours. And the deal was, well, Crimea was lost by then, but by that time, because of the referendum, and nobody, including my colleague John Kerry, meeting with us, nobody in the West was raising the issue of Crimea. Everybody was concentrated on Donbass. And the Minsk agreements provided for territorial integrity of Ukraine, minus Crimea, this was not even raised, and a special status for a very tiny part of Donbass, not for the entire Donbass, not for Novorossiya at all. Part of Donbass, under this Minsk agreements endorsed by the Security Council, should have the right to speak Russian language, to teach Russian language, to study in Russian, to have local law enforcement like in the states of US, to be consulted when judges and prosecutors are appointed by the central authority, and to have some facilitated economic connections with neighboring regions of Russia. That's it. Something which President Macron promised to give to Corsica.
All right, let's stop there. So, I mean, what he's referring to is the Minsk agreement, which was basically a deal that came up in 2014 that, you know, outlined what, you know, something that would essentially hold in place until 2022. You know, I mean, it's, and then after that, after the war started, then there was additional talks that went on, and once again, the Americans were the ones. I think America, you know, basically talked Ukraine out of making a deal. You know, I think it was March or April of 22. And so, I mean, you know, I get the feeling that the Russians have wanted to talk at times. The Ukrainians have wanted to talk at times. Hell, Turkey tried to do talks in Turkey. But the U.S. just hasn't seen, you know, it's like, listen, no, full speed ahead. You're going to get your Crimea back, or we're going to get you whatever. It's like these outlandish promises that can't be held to. And everybody is just completely, you know, oh, we're just in it for the war, right? You know, Joe, what they're in it for is trillions of dollars worth of energy is what they're in it for.
Well, they're in it for trillions of dollars worth of defense contractor money on all of these artillery shells and rockets and ammo and things like that. Let's also not forget the American military contracting businesses that are all over Ukraine, doing all kinds of logistics security, all kinds of things like that. So there's a lot of money to be made in Ukraine. And by the way, it solves a problem. It gets rid of those pesky Ukrainians.
Well, and I think some of it was the belief that when the war ends, we'll get these lucrative contracts to go in and rebuild. Mm-hmm. And there's not going to be lucrative contracts to rebuild because Russia's going to hold on to that territory. I think a lot of the ground for this was laid during the Obama administration. You had the invasion of the Crimea in 2012, and the Obama administration sent humanitarian aid. I mean, it was
2014.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, 2014. But yeah, we didn't jump in. We didn't, there was no international outrage. There was no let's rally NATO, Russia's coming at us thing.
Well, that's because it wasn't an invasion. That's a misconception.
Well, yeah.
They were invited in by the actual elected legislature of Crimea, and the government of Ukraine had approved it before the revolution.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, when all is said and done, this concept of we're not going to buckle, NATO's not going to buckle until Russia's completely driven out is ridiculous because it's not going to happen. It's impossible.
It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so we're walking to the bargaining table with a completely unrealistic expectation. And I think it sounds like the Russians are going, look, we've tried coming in with realistic expectations. You guys don't want to hear them.
Yeah, it didn't work. All right. Anyway, I thought this was interesting. I'm probably going to take some time this weekend to listen to this one. Lavrov is, like you said, Joe, he's a pretty level-headed guy. Not a whole lot of the vim and vigor that you get with some of the other Russians with him. He seems very pragmatic, and I'd be interested to see if there isn't something we could learn from listening to what the guy has to say. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, in order for talks to make any difference, you have to listen to these people, and it doesn't matter if you like them or not. You have to make a deal with them. So, and ultimately, I think that's probably what Trump and his administration will hopefully bring to this. Though I'm not super happy about his pick for Secretary of State, who is definitely one of the members of the War Party, at least has been in the past. Final thoughts on that, guys?
There are no good guys in that fight.
Yeah, that's right. Well, except for the innocent, right? And there aren't even that many of them. All right. Joe, you want to talk a little bit about what you got going on? We're on tactical-wisdom.com.
Sure. We don't have a new article yet this week. I am working on it. We'll get there. But what we do have is an updated schedule for the first half of the year for training at Camp Ponderosa and elsewhere. I'll be returning to North Carolina in February. We've got a full stack of classes going on there. We've got Fieldcraft from me. We've got Matt's Scout and Recce courses, and then Fighting Kalashnikov, all in about a 10-day period that you can get to. If you go to training courses, it'll pull it up. Scroll down, you'll see a class list there. Boom, all the upcoming courses. My newest one coming up is in January. We're going to have a stick and knife combatives thing. You want to learn how to fight with a stick or a knife? We'll spend a whole day on it. That's followed by Kay from Combat Studies Group doing ground rod level 2 here. And then in February, I'll be down at NC Scout's place and running a bunch of classes there. Then NC Scout will be coming up here, and for May, he's running an RTO course, so how to use your radios here in Montana, followed by SIGINT, learning how to detect other people operating around you. And we decided we would throw a 2-day night fighting class in there where we're getting out under nods and doing some shooting and moving and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll be running a community security class afterwards. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of training this year. As things begin to fall apart, I think folks need to get out here and do stuff. And you'll see on my list there are a lot of combatives classes. We're getting back to some of my first training I did, and teaching folks how to fight. You need to have that hand-to-hand aggressiveness and everything. Yes, Laura, you do still get to do a land nav course for me. Seriously, that girl's a natural navigator. I took her one spot when we were setting up the other course, and she was going to be a role player for us. She went back there in the dark with no reference, with no problem. And then I'm sitting there under my nods watching for my students to come through, and I can't see them. And Laura goes, they're right over there. And I'm like, I take my nods off. I'm like, she had better vision without nods than I did with nods. So pretty good. And actually, Rick, Duke of Malta, I train in Hapkido, so there is a whole cane fighting thing in there. Absolutely, dude. We can do a cane fighting class for you.
All right. I mean, and not only will you guys learn something, you go to that class, you're gonna have a good time. Just the networking that you'll be able to do will be worth the price of admission. And oh, by the way, you're learning from some real pros who can help you kind of take some of those skills to the next level.
And look, if you come out to Camp Ponderosa, you can see the rocks that I live under, the line of mountains just in my backyard. And it's a gorgeous setting and a great site. And we're going to be doing some alumni weekends in like June and September, where anyone who's ever been to a class of mine or Matt's or Kay's can just come and hang out for the weekend. No programmed instruction. We're just going to camp out together and have fun. And I think that's going to be worth the trip too. Don't forget, Shield Field Days will be sometime in the end of July. We've got it narrowed down to those 2 weeks, and we'll pick a date here once one of the key benefactors gets back in the U.S. We'll have a date for Shield Field Days that everyone, including Blaine L. Pardo, should consider coming to, because we have a good time. A lot of fans come out here. The Shield Arms food truck is something to be experienced. They have
that was some good food.
Yeah, they make good food. And hanging out with guys like Exuberous Designs and Father Abraham and all the other Twitter personalities that you know and love is worth the expense, with a couple notable exceptions who were there. But anyway, it's a good time. Come on out, watch our thing. And by the way, if you happen to be in Northwest Montana this weekend, you can catch me at the Kalispell Gun Show out at the Flathead County Fairgrounds Saturday and Sunday.
Very good. Very good. And, there's somebody else got something to talk about. Blaine, look what I've got. I've got the placeholder
I've
cover.
got it on mine too. That's part of our weekend's project too.
I dug into the first chapter just yesterday, and so I'm going to be reading over the weekend. This is coming out in January, right, Blaine?
Yeah, January 7th.
But the pre-order is open now, correct?
Oh yeah, except for the paperback. For Amazon's weird about putting pre-order paperback up.
Well, so it's available on Kindle. I know that your hearing has something to do with you listening to the audiobook, no? Or...
Yeah, I've been trying to review the audiobook, which has been obnoxiously loud, according to my wife. But it's been going good. I really like this. It's a fun series. Mike and I are almost done with the second book. So this is going to be fun. It's the Punisher going after the woke. What more do you want?
What more could you ask for?
Yeah. I don't shelter it at all. It's brutal violence. And I enjoy that. It's kind of a great release series for me, at least.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of just, turn loose a little bit on, because the other part of it too is you're writing with somebody else. I'm kind of curious about that process. How's that process? Let's turn the clock back here to old Writers Fix Problems days.
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about the process you and Mike did.
Well, I had Mike on and was talking to him about one of his projects. At the end of the show, I said, I'd really like at some point to partner with you on something. He goes, okay, let's do it. And so I said, he goes, what ideas do you have? I said, well, you did the Punisher. Wouldn't it be cool to go after the woke? The people that have tormented us and tormented so many other people. And he goes, oh, well, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's just go do that. And Mike's actually started sketching out the profile for the third book, which it has a peanut theme to it. I'll leave that open to you guys' interpretation. But, we take modern day stuff and put it in there. I write a bunch of chapters. I send it over to Mike. Mike rewrites some of what I do, then adds a whole bunch of chapters, sends it to me. I rewrite his chapters a little bit, then add my chapters, send it to him. So we kind of volley it back and forth. It's on, and the new book right now that we're working on, it's in his queue. So he's going through reading all the stuff I've added and tweaking it as we go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the idea. This guy is not a happy camper, and so I'm really looking forward to get into it. You've already said what it's about, so that's about all I would be able to add at this point. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, brother, and appreciate the read ahead.
Oh yeah, well, I look forward to you guys boosting it if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll continue to push it through the launch, and I can't wait. I can't wait. I'm a big fan of the audiobook, so I can't wait to see that one come out as well. So, all right, let's jump back into it, guys. We're going to talk about Syria again because let me tell you, man, Syria is the only thing going faster than Russia in the Donbass is the HTS cutting through the Syrian army like a knife through hot butter, or a hot knife through butter. Joe, have you? Let me ask you this: have you been surprised how this is kind of moving along?
Not really, because the Syrian government doesn't really have that much gas left in it, right? They've been barely holding on to what they have. I am surprised at how quickly al-Nusra, I refuse to call them anything else, al-Nusra and ISIS have been able to recharge and get back in the field. That was a bit surprising to me. And that's really about it. I'm not surprised. If anyone gave the Syrian Arab army a good push, it was going to fall over. And that's exactly what's happening. They captured an entire base nearly intact, I think a day and a half ago, that had several T-90s and a whole bunch of Tigers on it. So they've just picked up some vehicles.
Well, and so on Monday of the show, if you could pull the map up, I just want to kind of take people through a little trip to show. All right, so this is a Damascus area. So let's go. Actually, this is even south of Damascus. Let's start near Aleppo. So Aleppo up here. Scroll up. There we go. Right there, where that green dot right there, that one. So this is Aleppo. On Monday, we were talking about in the show that, they'll probably have Aleppo. They're in Aleppo as we were doing the show on Monday, right? And then on Wednesday, if you remember, guys, they were at this city called Homs. And Hama. And then they hadn't taken it yet, but they were right at the outskirts. Well, now Hama has fallen, and now they are literally knocking at the door of Homs, which is another large city. And after Homs, it's not what you'd call a hop, skip, and a jump, but the next big city is Damascus. So I just wanted to kind of take you guys through the map of it. And like literally most of this green area is newly captured land. And I think you're right, Joe. They have basically folded like a cheap suit. I get the feeling that they're just, the Russians were kind of propping them up and the Iranians were helping out. And, but with the Iranians are all on a schlitz with all the stuff that Israel's been doing against Hezbollah and Hamas. So I get the feeling that they're running out of gas as well. And then if you've noted, I don't know if you've seen the reports, Joe, but the helicopters have all moved out. The Russian helicopters have all moved south to Damascus. And they're getting, if I remember correctly, we had reports that the Russians were pulling out of their base at Tartus. This entire area is getting ready. This coastal area here, the Tartus government and the Latakia government are going to be cut off once Homs falls. So I hate to say it, if they get Homs, that's pretty much the whole ball game, because then basically the Syrian government has Damascus, and that's about it. Because let me tell you, the rest of this red area to the east, ain't a whole lot out there. That's all desert. Joe?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much to stop them there, but I do know that there are reinforcements from Iraq, Iran, and various other places streaming into Damascus. So you may see a fight. They may have decided that it's better to shorten their perimeter and hold Damascus than it is to try and fight them everywhere.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing that we saw north of Baghdad when ISIS came out the first time, right?
Let me so this first story about this is titled "Why Syria is More Relevant Today Than Before," which is kind of interesting, and I wanted to put this in front of you guys. It connects a lot of what's going on with Turkey, and we're going to talk a lot about Turkey today. Amid the swift and stunning collapse of Aleppo following the assault by HTS, which is internationally sanctioned as a terrorist group, it is important to pause and recall that we've been here before. The advance by HTS and Turkish-backed rebels in Syria suggests Turkey is playing its cards before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump takes office. Gosh, Joe, it's almost like we were talking about that both on Monday and Wednesday, right? Like everybody out there is playing their cards to get as much stuff under their belt before Trump comes in and potentially starts negotiating with these forces. Which that doesn't surprise me. Turkey has been frustrated with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad repeated refusal to come to the negotiating table and meet with Turkish President Erdogan. Although both Syrian and Turkish defense and intelligence chief have met regularly in Russia, al-Assad has been negotiating through his ministers while relying on UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Russia for diplomatic push. Yet while the finger to blame has been pointed on Turkey, the Israeli factor cannot be discounted, which I think this is one of the most interesting things here. And it really just goes to show you the realpolitik that Israel's playing. You know, these countries are all countries that potentially could be hostile to Israel, but we're seeing a lot of coordination with Israel. And I think probably Turkey and maybe even some of the Arab countries. Just days before the fall of Aleppo, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened Syria against facilitating aid to Hezbollah. And it is no coincidence that the crisis began shortly after the Lebanese ceasefire was finalized. It was almost timed perfectly to suggest there's somehow been some nod to the armed groups in Idlib. Some Syrian opposition groups have acknowledged Israel's ceasefire helped them. Turkish-backed groups went so far as to thank Israel and further said they want good relations with Tel Aviv, which is really interesting to me. I mean, this is like, you know, HTS wants to have good relations with Israel. I mean, what kind of alternate timeline are we living in, Joe?
I'm sorry, I was engaging with someone in the chat. What did you ask me?
I said the fact that HTS potentially wants to have good relations with Tel Aviv. I mean, what kind of
no self-respecting terrorist wants that, and every time you say HTS, I'm going to remind you that it's Al Qaeda.
Well, it's Al Qaeda, but you know, it's just it's a different branch of Al Qaeda. You know,
it's same stuff, different day. They just don't want to be killed. That's why they want good relations with Tel Aviv.
Oh yeah, they want to still continue to get. Well, I don't know how much support they're getting from the U.S. nowadays, but I bet the answer is not zero.
But I would warn Tel Aviv on this, since it's not Monday, that you're going to run into the same situation we had when we funded the Mujahideen. Once HTS or Al Qaeda or Al Nusra, whatever they call themselves this week, overthrows Syria, they now become your problem because they're your neighbor. And, you're going to have to deal with them at some point.
Oh, excuse me. All right. Let's see. So the difference here, though, is
I'm sorry. I had to unmute. I just want to add to that before we leave that dear ISIS / Al Qaeda / HTS / whatever you're calling them these days, if the Israelis that you're currently taking money from in order to do this happen to offer you communications equipment, you should definitely take it. It's a very good idea. It's excellent stuff. You're gonna love it.
HTS likes their pagers. Here's the interesting thing. So, like, the leader of HTS has actually came out recently and is signaling that we have to switch from just being a military organization to one that can govern. And I think that was I think this is him trying to turn on a charm offensive that will allow him not to be considered just a terrorist when this is all said and done. Because you can drop a bomb on a terrorist when this is all said and done, but if you're the magnanimous Arab, Sunni, or yeah, he's a Sunni. If you're the Sunni former terrorist that can live in peace with the Alawites and in peace with the Christians, then all of a sudden it's a lot harder just to drop a JDAM on you and call it a day. Though honestly, that's what I would do. So it's been interesting to see him come out and try to get ahead of a victory. So without exception of Qatar, all Arab ambassadors are back in Damascus. And since the fall of Aleppo, there have been a reaffirming of support for Syria, making a key difference from when the conflict was viewed as a civil war. So that's interesting that the Arabs are publicly behind them. Indeed, as Aleppo was falling, the UAE and the U.S. were on the verge of potentially removing sanctions on Syria. Assad must now finally take their advice on rapprochement with the Turkish president before the situation spirals out of control. That'll be interesting to see.
This is because the Arabs are afraid of being ruled by either the Turks or the Persians.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, hey, we better stand up for our own people, because either Iran or Turkey is going to be in charge here. And this is not good for us in any way, shape, or form.
Well, Joe, after Saudi Arabia had that, let's just call it that disastrous, kind of campaign in Yemen, they had a lot of losses. I don't think that they have a big belly full of leading Arab armies into other countries. So it's been kind of interesting to see Saudi Arabia kind of take a diplomacy only kind of position in these types of things. It's very safe.
Yeah.
Blaine, any thought from you on this thus far? I don't know if you've been following this one. It's been a pretty mad dash all week.
I've only been giving it cursory attention because honestly, Syria is not as big a player as it used to be.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as this is a little weird. Like out of the blue, this started happening and it happened pretty quick. But we'll see where it goes. I'm not sure. I like the fact that Israel, excuse me, is keeping the Middle East destabilized.
Yeah, for me, it's not so much that I find a whole lot interesting with the actual fight itself. What I find interesting is what might happen when it's all said and done, right? That's where I look for instability to come from, is in the kind of aftermath to see who takes over, where are the new power bases, where are the loyalties? Is this a Syria that is loyal to Turkey? Does Turkey try to grab more? Does Turkey try to annex? So these are the kind of interesting questions that, if you use Chinese logic, Joe, Turkey can basically say, this is all Turkish land. We want it all back, so,
or Russian logic. Vladimir Putin did give the history lesson to end all history lessons that day.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Oh, that was best.
Oh boy!
And off the top of his head, right? So,
yeah, but how many Americans could do that about their own country?
And we don't even have as much history to go through,
right?
So anyway, I this is kind of where I think is interesting. We got some footage here further down we can look at. So this is scroll down. There's an air base that let's see, unconfirmed footage of Al Qaeda cut out HTS. No, it's Al Qaeda. It's just Al Qaeda celebrating capturing a Syrian army base in Hama. Israel and the U.S. and Turkey have reignited the dirty war on Syria, going through their terrorist proxies as Bashar al-Assad's forces and allies scramble to put together counteroffensive Iraq's popular mobilization forces have entered Syria to join Assad's forces. That's one thing that's interesting, Joe. I haven't seen much. We saw some of that video on Wednesday about the popular mobilization forces, but we really haven't seen much out of them since. So I'm curious, if to see how much of that is real and how much of it's propaganda.
Well, how much of these are actually Syrian, are actually the popular mobilization forces, and how many of them are the extremist militias that have sprung up in between the gaps, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Look, everybody's in a mad scramble right now because everyone knows that we don't have a president sitting in the White House.
Yeah.
And if you're going to pull any sort of international stunts, land grabs, bold moves, you do it between now and January 20th, because there's going to be a new sheriff in town, and he's the old sheriff, and he already knows the game, and he's not going to put up with a lot of shenanigans. So you're going to see a lot of moves like this all around the globe, I think, in the next month, because people are going to go, if I'm going to pull something, I better pull it now. Because Biden looked like Ebenezer Scrooge last night when he showed up at the national tree lighting. I mean, he was a cross between that and the Crypt Keeper. He is literally on his last legs. So this is the time to pull any international ploy, no matter how bold.
Yeah, specifically, we've seen this, Blaine, in both Ukraine and Syria. I think the two most obvious examples of this. Russia is gobbling up as much of Ukraine as it can before the cutoff. The 19th of January rolls around. They'll probably ceasefire on the 19th, so that Trump can have his day, and then they'll be expecting a call. Putin will be expecting a call any minute, early in the morning on the 21st Russia time. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think you're absolutely right. I think this is exactly what they're doing here as well. Turkey, through Erdogan, is making his move because he wants to set the table as positively as he can. So when he starts talking to Donald Trump. And, and a lot of these guys think that Donald Trump respects a strong man, right? I don't know if that's necessarily true, but generally strong men are able to are able to negotiate singularly, right? The only guy who can make a deal for Russia is Putin. The only guy who can make a deal for Turkey is Erdogan, right? That's the one advantage to talking to a strong man, is that's the buck stops with him. In these liberal democracies, you never know who you need to make a deal with,
Well,
all right.
Yeah, but Trump's not a strong guy. I think it's more of Trump loves the art of negotiating. He really does. He wrote the book on it. Okay. He loves bartering, and if he uses bravado and bullying to do that, he loves doing it. And at least you know who you're dealing with when you're dealing with a strong guy. And Trump's not as much a threat to international peace as he is a guy who's willing to sit down and negotiate. And it upsets the Europeans because they believe somehow that they own that terrain, that they're the master negotiators.
All right. I missed the super chat here. I want to go back and get it. Peanut Chase Helicopter Tours for $5 says odds the far Lorenz left in unison are openly calling for it as a routine Fed poster. I am surprised how open the left calls are planned accordingly. Yeah, I think what you were talking about is the assassination and how they're kind of they're trumpeting it as such a good thing, which, let's be honest, assassinations in the streets are universally bad in any universe, unless it's happening in maybe the CCP. All right, let's go on to the next story. Erdogan has interest in Syria's reignited war. Yeah, this is, I wanted to kind of take that first story and set it up for this one. Let's see. News of the civil war in Syria has flared up, and it's come to no surprise to the people of Turkey. President Erdogan and his right-wing nationalist coalition partner have talked about little else than the shift in power in the Middle East and the possible negative consequences could be for Turkey. The suggestion has been the regional changes could be advantageous to the Kurds in Syria, who have controlled northeastern. I always forget how to. Is it Rehova or Rojava? I can't remember. That's the Kurdish name. Rojava. Yeah. Also known as the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. Since the civil war began in 2011, the Turkish government is also concerned about the development in the region. The Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's ties to Hezbollah and Iran have been weakened after a year of attacks on Israel, and Assad's protector Russia is increasingly invested in the invasion of Ukraine. This is the interesting thing, Joe, and I think if there's as much to blame as anything, it's been the weakening support for Syria, because let's be honest, Syria is kind of a backwater. Iran's focused on Israel, Russia's focused on Ukraine, and we've seen Russia has been very successful in focusing on Ukraine here lately. But sometimes it's hard to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, and you can do one right, but maybe not both things. So I think Assad has definitely paid the price for that.
Well, yes, because pre-Ukrainian invasion, the Russian naval infantry put a serious dent in ISIS's ability to operate. They did some serious fighting on the ground and from the air. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, the Russians were a key factor to Assad kind of. I think there were two key factors. One was us, and our Kurdish allies putting the hurting on them, and then the other was, Russia. Let's be honest, it was mostly Russia. It wasn't so much Syria. It was mostly the Russian Marines that were doing most of that. Let's see. A window of opportunity for the Syrian rebels. The rebels recognize the situation as a window of opportunity, starting a major offensive. Observers in Ankara say it was likely informed of the operation before it commenced. Without Ankara's acquiescence or potentially its support, there's no way HTS could stand a chance against Assad. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes support from Turkey going into this. The other thing too is I feel like this is just step one, because I think they're going to go after the Kurds next. And so in this article kind of talks about that. Ankara's aims is to topple the Kurds. While Syria's civil war began, Ankara sided with the rebels, breaking off all diplomatic relations with Damascus. More recently, Erdogan has attempted to revive diplomatic talk, but Assad rejected the overture. But Turkey is not willing to withdraw its troops from what it calls a security zone in northern Syria. The moment the two powerful groups operating in this region, the HTS, the SNA, the later, according to Turkish Middle East expert, immediately started an offensive against the Kurds. So that's the SNA. They are fighting against the Kurds right now and took significant sections of Kurdish-controlled areas north of Aleppo. Ankara denies any involvement in Syria.
That's because they have to pay the bill, right? The bill for their continued arming by Turkey is to fight the Kurds.
Well, the other thing, the irony there is, Joe, is that Turkey's already moving into Aleppo based on the pictures and reports on the ground, and I think ultimately that's what Turkey wants, is they want the Kurds out of the way. And that includes both the PYD and the PKK, which are the two kind of groups that are mainly operating in that area. Anyway, so I think that the interaction of Erdogan in this and the kind of three-way struggle that's going on, the one thing that I think that Erdogan has done a really good job of is keeping the Kurds and the Syrians from kind of talking to each other. I felt like there were opportunities for a natural alliance there, but I think maybe it's the Americans have kept the Kurds from talking to Syria just because of the Russian influence, but I could be wrong there. ultimately, I don't think it's going to end well for the Kurds, if you ask me. Guys, anything else on this before we move on? All right. I think, the next one is just a tweet. This is a speech from Erdogan. I thought we could kind of get it from the horse's mouth here. There's no audio. Don't you want to listen to his wonderful voice, sonorous?
You want to listen to him speaking Turkish? Okay.
Well, I otherwise I just need to read the thing.
I actually gibberish.
Well, right, but he's not speaking in English, so you'd have to read the thing.
Anyway. I know. My point is that I've heard enough Turkish for my entire life. I just need to read it. So if you could roll it back, and I'll read the.
You guys are fucking with me because I got hearing problems, and it's not funny.
All right, go back to the beginning so I can read this.
I just did.
I know, but Blaine was talking, and so it started while you were doing it. All right. As of now, Idlib and Hama, go ahead and push play. Homs and, of course, Damascus. This march of the opposition continues. We are following the situation on the media with our intelligence. We hope that this march in Syria will continue without any accidents. Interesting. But the resistance continues in Syria with terror organizations present in the area. We have called Assad. We said, let's determine the future of Syria together. We did not receive a positive response, unfortunately. And as of now, Idlib, Hama.
No, that's
back to the beginning again.
Oh, back to the beginning. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So essentially what he's saying that there are terrorist organizations there, but he is very happy for the terrorists who are on his side to continue on with the fight. Hey, Sean, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good.
We were just talking a little Syria.
The moderate head choppers. They cut your head off with the sharper machete.
That's right. How are you doing?
And they don't film it.
Yes,
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Yeah, we're holding it down. What are your kind of takes on what's been going on with Syria?
I mean, once again, people so want to own the Russians so badly, they're willing to let Al Qaeda and Al Nusra possibly take over Syria to own the Russians.
That's own the Russians.
It's like, yes, you may not like Russia, but I'm pretty sure Al Qaeda is still 100 times worse than Russia.
Well, at least when the CIA was pulling Al Qaeda strings, at least it was Americans, right? Now it's the Turkish that are doing it. So even if he gets rid of them after it's all said and done, then it's the Turkish who are in charge. And well, let's be honest, that could potentially be even worse.
It's going to be worse in a lot of ways. I mean, this is. If Turkey gets their way here, all the people on Reddit for their hecking Kurderinos, the Kurds are going to have a very tough time because guess what happens once Assad's done? Everybody's going to turn back to the proverbial punching bag in the situation, the Kurds. So,
yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. I think that if there's an ultimate goal for Erdogan, it's either one of two things. It's to reestablish the Ottoman domains, or it's to finally, once and for all, rid himself of this Kurdish problem that he's got. And I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't push all the way into Iraq to do that, especially if we pull out once Trump comes in.
Well, I mean, it also becomes, though, the issue of, Azerbaijan is ascending, and that they're all part of the Pan-Turkic, they're all part of the Pan-Turkic, band, and that's just another step into that. And then then Iran, 25% of Iran are Azeri, and they want to make their pan, Azeri little spot, and it's going to go from there. So
well, and then Iran, was it last year, Joe? Iran was saying that they're willing to come in on the side of Armenia if Armenia and Azerbaijan go to blows.
Yes.
And then of course Russia, yeah. So the wild card in all of this, for my money, and I find to be the most interesting player at this point, is Israel. And so this final story here would talk about Israel's preparing for a possibility of Syrian state collapse. Honestly, Syrian state collapse is probably the most likely outcome here. Like, nobody has the ability to kind of fully consolidate. So it's just kind of like Mad Max, times 100. Israeli leaders and military officials are reportedly engaging at high level over fast-moving events in Syria, which have seen Turkish-backed Islamists based in Idlib rapidly capture the major cities of Aleppo and Hama in less than a week. Let's see, Defense Minister Israel Katz and IDF chief are carefully monitoring the situation across the border as jihadists, which is the correct term for what these guys are. They are jihadists. They are Al-Qaeda jihadists. The IDF is following events and is preparing for any scenario in attack and defense, the military said. What does a Syrian collapse look like to you guys? Do you think that the HTS is going to be able to consolidate if Assad decides to flee to Iran or to Russia? Where do you think that ends up at?
I think it ends up as Turkey saying, well, listen, we're willing to provide peacekeepers and a transition team and all of that, but Assad has to go.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably your most likely end state.
Sean, you got a strong thoughts on that?
I mean, at this point, you end up with, okay, if HTS can't, and I hate calling him that. Well, sounds like the Korean band or whatever. If Al Nusra wins, okay, great. Then Syria is completely a failed state, and okay, there's some spots where the Kurds are in charge, and there's some spots where the U.S. are okay. But then the thing that everybody was worried about, the new, it's a new location for terrorism to start brewing out of, and like, we're letting it happen. I think the Israelis, for everything they did before, where the times where fighters could come across the border up in the Golan Heights, they could get treatment, they could get help, because Israel did do that, guys. If you're not aware, they were, to chat out there. Israel did that. They were helping provide support to fighters because, hey, they're fighting Syria. Great. I think Israel is not they were happy with Syria kind of having to force resources on this, but I think Israel is very concerned right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, hey, what bridge can we bomb for you in the meantime to try to slow this down? Because if I was Israel, I'd be looking to do that, because I don't want this on my doorstep, because they're not going to stop. If Al Nusra shows up on the Golan Heights, guess what they're doing? They're not just going to be happy on their side of the fence.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, right? So, as Israel kind of looks at what could happen as a state collapse in Syria, he says there have been unconfirmed reports that one Israeli option would be to consider creating a buffer zone inside southern Syria in a scenario that some kind of state collapse, and should HTS make it to Homs and eventually to Damascus. Some analysts have accused Israel of covertly supporting HTS. No, say it ain't so. I can't imagine Israel would ever do that. Supporting their ongoing rampage across the northern half of the country. Let's see. And an unnamed U.S. official told Axios on Thursday that at the moment, the HTS insurgents are in control of the central city of Hama, which is what we reported. The official said, we don't think that the regime is in immediate danger, but the biggest challenge for Assad regime is in the last decade. Let's be honest. None of us thought that Hama was under threat, less than a week ago, and yet they're now it's now controlled by HTS. Blaine, I mean,
let's
Israel.
Also point out that the people who say that Israel is secretly controlling Al Qaeda are the people who also say that Israel is secretly controlling the weather, the Russians. Right. Come on.
I could believe that there is some advantage to providing moderate levels of support to them, but ultimately, I think you're right, Joe. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that Syria, that Israel's pulling really any strings with this. Probably, if they're coordinating with anybody, it's Turkey. If I'm honest, and we talked about that on Monday.
My thought is, I'm going to be the naysayer. I think Israel enjoys watching its enemies shoot at each other. I think it gives them a good impetus to not necessarily create a buffer zone, but to take back some land that provides security. And if you watch everything that's come out of the Israeli government in the last year, it's all been about security for the Israeli state. So, I could easily see them launching a preemptive strike in if Syria becomes any more destabilized, going, hey, we're going to grab some land here just because it's necessary for our defense. And I can see them doing it. And would they be ceding, support to do that? Yeah, I think they would. I think they would actually help probably both sides shoot each other.
Hey, who occupies the Golan Heights?
Israel.
Right.
If there's a map, actually, if you go down a little further, just to kind of illustrate that point, there's a map, and this is basically who owns what land. That's actually worse than. And so if you look, as soon as Watcher gets that point, that looks pretty good. Yeah, so this is like, the green is the Turkish, folks. Red is Assad. Yellow are the Kurds. Green are, like the light green down here at the bottom is U.S. controlled land. But if you scroll down a little bit, Watcher, it's, most people forget this part, right? That blue down there, just overlooking Damascus, that's Israel. Israel theoretically owns part of Syria, though my understanding is they have fully annexed the Golan Heights.
But is Golan Heights part of Syria, part of Lebanon, that was occupied by Syria and is now occupied by the Israelis?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Joe. Do you?
Yeah, it's part of Lebanon.
Okay,
it was occupied by Syria, then Israel.
I didn't realize you were quizzing me there. I didn't know the answer there, because I do know the Syrians had it before the Israelis took it. So,
but the Syrians took it when they occupied Lebanon.
Yeah. So anyway, this is a very complex puzzle that if it continues to move as fast as it's been moving. On Monday's show, we'll have all new updates on Syria to share with you. So,
if it continues by Monday, it'll be HTS made it all the way to Tel Aviv,
to Damascus for sure. Yeah, 100%. All right. So now we're going to push the button out on YouTube, and we're going to switch over to Rumble. We're going to be talking about some of the transitions. What's that?
We're going to be talking about Blue Dawn.
I know, right? The prequel chapters of Blue Dawn that are actually going to occur. I remind you that Trump was the president in Blue Dawn.
I'll remind you, it all happened during a presidential transition. So.
Right.
I'll remind you, it's available on Amazon.com right now.
It's a very good book,
as well as Audible and anywhere else fine books are sold.
Let's just real quick. Let's say goodbye to the YouTube audience. Mods, if you could drop the. Actually, I'll just do it. and mods, feel free to share it as well. The Rumble link is in the chat. Real quick, around the horn, any final thoughts for the YouTube audience before we start talking Trump transition stuff?
Yes, if you want to buy Tactical Wisdom signed books, T-shirts, or patches for Christmas, you have exactly 1 week to get that done. I can't guarantee the Postal Service beyond that.
Yeah. All right, Watcher, let's hit it.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America. This is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone.
3, 6, 4, 6.
The chair is against the wall.
3, 6.
The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache.
8, 2, 5.
John has a long mustache.
8, 2, 5, 0, 9.
It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.